Hi, my name is Jonathon Oxlade and I'm the designer of Bambert's book of Lost Stories. I live in Adelaide, which is down the very bottom of Australia in South Australia. I grew up in Queensland, in Brisbane, and I studied visual art. So I studied illustration and sculpture, which led me into theatre, funnily enough. Illustration and sculpture are a good marriage. Illustration is the relationship between words and images. So it works quite well when you start thinking about scripts and making pictures for them. So in a way, without studying theatre, I kind of did it in a visual art sense. I think I became a theatre designer only through wanting to see my illustrations and my sculptures move. So when I was studying art, I was interested in animation and I was interested in my sculptures coming to life, and that's kind of close to puppetry and theatre. So I ended up becoming a theatre designer through trying to make those pictures move. And so I went overseas to the Czech Republic in Europe and I studied puppetry for a short time, which gave me the skills and scenography skills to make sets and make objects and connect them and make them move, which then when I returned to Australia led me into designing more for theatre, so sets and costumes, and making characters that moved more so than were stuck in pages. Bambert's Book of Lost Stories was a conversation that I had with the director Luke, and we were talking about it for quite a bit of time, and Luke had been working on this, developing this idea of turning it into a theatre show for almost 10 years, which is a very long time to be working on a piece. And so he'd developed it with different people, and it came to a point where he really wanted to kind of see this show happen. And so Luke thought through the match of puppetry, which is in the show, and also the visual world that we wanted to create, that I was probably a good designer for the job, and I'm really glad that he asked me to do it. And so we worked on it for maybe a couple of years. Bambert's Book of Lost Stories, the actual stories that we've used in the piece are all based on a book by Reinhard Jung. And inside that story, inside the big story of Bambert, there's lots of multiple stories that he writes as letters. So the design for the work came about by trying to make a set and a space that all of these stories could coexist within. And so within our space, we have hints of Cordoba in Spain. We have hints of like dark alleys in London. They're all kind of in there. And when the idea was that we would create a design that contained all little hints at the stories that are in Reinhardt's book. And we didn't do all of the stories that are in his book, but there's lots of little tiny pieces of bits that aren't in the book as well. And then of course there's Mr. Bloom's shop, which is a very big component of Bambert's life, because Bambert lives above Mr. Bloom's shop and things travel between the two. So we had to incorporate his shop, which is sort of the main structure, and then everything else, all the other stories hang around that. Bambert is a puppet, and he's one of the only puppets in the show, because in Reinhardt's story and our story, he is impossibly small. And the best way to create someone that's totally impossibly small is to actually make them small. It also helps because we get to be inside an attic up the top of Bloom's shop. The reason we made him a puppet is so that he is small, and Reinhardt speaks a lot about the fact that nothing in Bambert's world, he didn't really fit in the real world. He doesn't really go out into the real world. So things are awkward for him. He can't grip things. He can't He can't really operate in the real world the way that many of us can. So the best way that we could show that was to make him about that big. The most difficult thing about designing the set and the costumes and the puppet for Bambert's Book of Lost Stories is trying to put lots and lots of things together. So like I said, there's so many stories that we hint at within the main story of the show, trying to find ways to combine those, and so that those things, so images like staircases can become one place, and then later that staircases can become another thing, is hard because you're layering ideas on top of each other and hoping that they all kind of work. So the trickiest thing is making sure that everything you need to tell the story is on stage. And because it's a visual theatre piece, we're relying on the pictures to tell the story as much as the words. The best thing about working on Bambert was actually getting to meet Bambert, because he's such a fantastic character. He speaks so much to the heart, and although he never actually speaks, he doesn't speak any words in the entire show. He kind of grumbles because he's quite old, but he never really speaks. And it's lovely to watch a puppet come to life. It's different to watching, it's just as exciting watching an actor perform, but when something inanimate comes to life, and you know, Bambert sometimes has 3 or 4 people operating him, it's really a beautiful thing. And it was lovely to see that character work so well, and because sometimes puppets, it's a lot of work involved to bring them to life, and it was so great to meet him. The best part for me about being a designer is getting to play with lots of different types of people. As a designer, you're one of the only people in a theatrical production that works with all of the actors in costume fittings and in rehearsals, the production manager who manages the builds, you work with workshop who build the set, you work with the costumiers who make the costumes, you work with producers who make the show, who give you the money to make the show, and obviously the director, who's the closest port of call, lighting designer. The designer moves between all sorts of different job descriptions, as a manager, as someone that has to communicate their work through drawing, through talking, and that's one of the joys for me, is being able to feel like you're across a whole, you're building an entire world with people. I really love that. The advice that I would give to any young theatre designer that's interested in making work for theatre is to see as much as you possibly can. Watch as much as you possibly can. Watch movies, go to the art gallery, look through magazines, read books. Theatre and making design for theatre is not only restricted to theatre, it's for all sorts of art influences theatre art. So look at everything and see everything.